Have you ever noticed how most people spend their lives chasing after peace while doing exactly what robs them of their peace? It is almost comical, if it were not so tragic. We are all exhausted, praying and asking for serenity, while keeping both hands busy holding our phones, checking email, accumulating commitments, and trying to prove to the world that we are enough. But here is the question nobody wants to ask. When was the last time you truly stopped? Not stopped to take a photo of your pause, not stopped to post about self-care, truly stopped, in silence, before God, without rush, without guilt, just you and Him. I bet you cannot remember. And do you know why? Because resting in God has become a beautiful concept from a shared verse, but nobody knows how to actually do it in practice anymore. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like. This helps the algorithm bring this refuge of peace to other people who, just like you, are tired of the noise and seeking a life with more purpose and presence. There is a verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 6 that says something profound. Better is a handful with quietness than both hands full, together with toil and grasping for the wind. The wisdom is in the words, a handful. To hold something valuable with attention, you need to let go of the rest. But we do the opposite. We fill both hands with so much that there is no space left for what truly matters. And when Jesus offers us rest, we respond, not now, I am busy. Later, I will stop. Just one more commitment, just one more achievement, just one more proof that I am doing well. And peace? It keeps waiting. God keeps waiting. And we continue carrying weight alone, complaining about the cross that we ourselves chose to carry. The truth is that the peace that few achieve is not for the few. It is available to everyone, but it requires you to do what most are not willing to do. Stop accumulating afflictions and start truly resting. And resting in God is not laziness, it is trust. It is letting go of control. It is accepting that you do not need to prove anything to anyone, not even to Him. Jesus was very clear in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Notice, the invitation is to find rest, not to conquer rest, not to deserve rest, to find, like someone finding something that was already there, waiting. Let us discover together 7 ways to finally stop, breathe, and truly rest in the presence of God. And when you master these ways, you will realize something transformative. You will not only have more peace than most, you will become that person others look at and think, how does she manage to be so calm in the midst of chaos? And then, you will have something precious to share. First way, cultivate sacred silence. We live in a world that fears silence. Background music everywhere. Television on with nobody watching. Cell phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications, messages, alerts, constant noise. And in the midst of all this noise, God whispers. But how will you hear Him if you never turn off the sound? Psalm 46 verse 10 brings a simple but profound command. Be still and know that I am God. Being still is not a suggestion. It is a commandment. Because only in silence can you know, understand, recognize that He is God. The story of Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19 is fascinating. He had just lived one of the most powerful moments of his ministry, the confrontation on Mount Carmel. But after the victory came exhaustion, the threat from Jezebel, fear, depression. Elijah flees to the wilderness and asks to die. God could have responded in many ways, but He chose silence. He sent Elijah to a cave and said, "Be quiet, observe, listen." Then came a strong wind that tore the mountains and broke the rocks. But God was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. Then came fire. But God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, a whisper. And that was where God was, in the silence, in the whisper, in what is almost imperceptible. But Elijah only heard because he was paying attention, because he was in silence, because he created space to listen. You need a place like this, a time like this. It does not need to be an expensive spiritual retreat. It does not need to be a trip to the mountains. It can be a corner of your house. It can be 20 minutes in the morning before everyone wakes up. It can be a walk without earphones. It can be a cup of tea without looking at your phone. The important thing is that it is intentional, that it is sacred, that it is protected. When you cultivate silence, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear things that previously went unnoticed. You begin to perceive the voice of God in the details, in the verse that jumps off the page, in the song that plays at the right moment, in the word from a friend, in the insight that comes from nowhere, because God has always been speaking. You just were not listening. You were too busy, too noisy, too distracted. Creating spaces of silence is an act of rebellion against the culture of noise. It is saying, I will not let the rush steal my peace. I will not let the world dictate my rhythm. I choose to stop. I choose to listen. I choose God. And the more you practice, the more you realize silence is not empty. It is full of the presence of God, full of peace, full of clarity, full of true rest. And it is precisely in this space of quietness that you can also care for other areas of your life that rob your peace. Every Saturday morning, I prepare my coffee, sit with my journal, and record all my expenses from the week. It may seem mundane, but this practice helps me keep my financial health in order in a simple, visual, and very effective way. It is almost meditative. It is intentional. And it gives me incredible clarity about where my money is going and, more importantly, whether it is aligned with my Christian values. If you, like me, desire to have a more serene and conscious relationship with your finances, I have a very special recommendation. I am an affiliate of the course Kakeibo, the Japanese method of silent wealth, which is at a promotional launch price precisely because the classes are being released gradually. As soon as the content is complete, the price will rise to full value. This is the ideal time to join, learn calmly from the beginning, and master your money with lightness. The course teaches you to abandon financial chaos, to cultivate a peaceful relationship with money, and to build wealth silently, without stress, without guilt, just with awareness and purpose. The link is in the video description. If you are seeking peace in your finances as well, this is the path. Second way, establish healthy and holy boundaries. Here is a radical but liberating exercise. For every new commitment you accept, an old one needs to go. For every new activity, something needs to be removed. For every yes you give, you need to have the freedom to say no to something else. Because the Christian life is not about adding more things to your list. It is about living with wisdom, with discernment, with boundaries. And yes, I said boundaries. Because contrary to what many preach out there, having boundaries is not lack of faith. It is demonstration of wisdom. It is recognizing that you are human, that your time is limited, that your energy is finite, and that it is okay to live within these boundaries because it was God who created them. Jesus lived only 33 years on earth, and even being the Son of God, even having power to do anything, he did not heal everyone. He did not visit all the cities. He did not meet all the requests. He had boundaries. And if the Son of God had boundaries, why do you think you should not have them? The problem is that we, Christian women, were taught that saying no is selfishness, that having boundaries is lack of love, that if someone needs something, you should be available, always, at any time, no matter the personal cost. But this is not biblical. This is martyrdom disguised as holiness, and it is slowly killing you. It is stealing your peace. It is distancing you from God, because you are so busy serving that you forgot to be served by Him. There is a beautiful passage in Mark where Jesus is in a house and the crowds begin to gather. Everyone wanted something from Him. Everyone needed healing, deliverance, a miracle. And what does Jesus do? He leaves. He literally leaves people waiting and goes to a deserted place to pray. And when the disciples find him and say, "Everyone is looking for you," Jesus responds, "Let us go somewhere else." He established a boundary. He said no, not because he did not care, but because he knew that to continue serving with purpose, he needed to stay connected to the Father. For every new commitment that knocks on your door, you need to have the courage to ask, is this from God or is it just urgent? Will this bring me closer to my purpose or just leave me more tired? Does this honor my boundaries or exceed them? And if the answer is no, you need to have the courage to refuse. Even if people do not understand, even if they think you are being selfish, even if they make you feel guilty. Because in the end, you will not give account to people. You will give account to God, and He will not ask you how many activities you did. He will ask you if you lived with integrity, if you guarded your heart, if you honored the boundaries that He Himself placed in you. Establishing boundaries is an act of faith. It is saying, Lord, I trust that you are sufficient, that I do not need to do everything, that I can rest, that I can say no, and that even so your work will be done, because it never depended only on me. Third way, embrace the grace that covers your imperfections. Here is something nobody told you. God does not expect you to be perfect. He already knows you are not, and still, He loves you, completely, unconditionally, without reservations. So why are you still trying to be perfect? Why are you still demanding so much from yourself? Why do you still think you need to prove something to God? The truth is that the more you accept your imperfections, the more space you create for grace. The more you recognize your limitations, the more you depend on God. And that is where true transformation happens. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 is one of the most liberating verses in the Bible. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Read that again. The power of God is not manifested in your strength. It is not manifested in your perfection. It is not manifested when you are impeccable. It is made perfect in your weakness. In other words, it is precisely when you recognize that you cannot, that God says, now I can act. But we do the opposite. We hide our weaknesses. We pretend everything is fine. We post beautiful verses while we are falling apart inside. We smile at church while we are crying at home, because admitting weakness seems like failure. Admitting imperfection seems like shame. Admitting you are not managing seems like lack of faith, but it is not. It is honesty. It is humility. It is the beginning of healing. God did not call perfect people. He called Moses, who had difficulty speaking. He called David, who committed adultery and murder. He called Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times in the most critical hour. He called Paul, who persecuted and killed Christians before being transformed. And still, He used each of them powerfully, not despite the flaws, but through them. Because when they broke, when they recognized their limitations, when they stopped trying to be strong alone, God could finally be God in their lives. I spent years trying to be the perfect Christian. I woke up early to pray. I read the Bible every day. I fasted regularly. I served in several ministries. I helped everyone. And I lived absolutely exhausted, because perfection is a prison. It is a race with no finish line. It is a standard nobody can reach, but everyone pretends they can. Until one day, I collapsed. Literally. I had an anxiety attack in the middle of a service, and there, in that moment of complete weakness, when I could no longer pretend, when I had no more strength to keep the mask, God met me. And do you know what He said? He did not say, get up and go back to work. He did not say, you are disappointing everyone. He did not say, where is your faith? He said, rest. You do not need to be strong. I am strong for you. My grace is sufficient. Embracing your imperfections is not giving up. It is letting God be God. It is recognizing that you are a work in progress. It is accepting that He is still working on you, and that it is okay not to have all the answers, not to always be well, not to always be strong, because the strength of God is manifested precisely in your weakness. And this is the peace that the world does not know. The peace of knowing you do not need to be perfect. You just need to be true. Fourth way, organize your life to protect sacred space. Do you know that feeling of always running but never getting anywhere? Of having 1,000 things to do but not being able to focus on any? Of wanting to pray but your mind is so full you do not even know where to start? This has a name, chaos. And chaos does not come from God. The Bible is clear in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. Where there is peace, there is order. Where there is order, there is space for God to breathe in your life. Now let us be practical. Do you have a place for God in your routine? I am not talking about theory. I am talking about real practice. Have you set aside a fixed time to pray? A physical space in your house where you meet with Him? Or has God become that commitment you fit in when you have time left over? Spoiler, there is never time left over. Time does not remain. Time is set aside. You choose, you decide, you prioritize. I will tell you something that changed my life. I used to think I would be more spiritual when I had less to do. But then I realized I would always have something to do. There would always be one more task, one more urgency, one more person needing me. The difference was in deciding what was priority. So I started organizing my life intentionally. Not perfectly, intentionally. Waking up 15 minutes earlier to read the Word before chaos begins. Creating a prayer corner in the living room, a place that was my refuge. Turning off the cell phone during that sacred time. Letting the family know that time was non-negotiable. And do you know what happened? My life continued busy. The demands did not decrease. But I stopped living anxiously, because now I had a place to return to, a space of peace, a routine that anchored me, a moment of the day when I was not mother, not wife, not professional, not leader. I was simply daughter, beloved daughter, heard daughter, rested daughter. Psalm 62 verse 1 says, "Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him." Notice the word truly. It is not in God and in my own strength. It is not in God and in my perfect planning. It is truly in God. And the soul can only find rest when you create space for rest, when you protect that space, when you treat that time as sacred, because it is. Organizing your life is not about perfection. It is about intentionality. It is about saying, God, I choose you, every day, in the midst of the mess, in the midst of the rush. I choose to stop and meet you. And when you make this choice consistently, something supernatural happens. Your life does not become less full, but you become more full of peace. Because you learn to protect what is sacred. You learn to create space for the one who is the source of your peace. Fifth way, choose depth over volume in your faith. Here is an uncomfortable truth. Most of us have an accumulating faith. We accumulate biblical knowledge, but not intimacy. We accumulate religious activities, but not transformation. We accumulate memorized verses, but not obedience. It is like having 10 Bibles at home, but never truly reading any of them. Like attending 5 services a week, but never having a real encounter with God. Like knowing everything about Jesus, but not knowing Jesus. The problem is not the quantity. The problem is when quantity replaces quality. When we are so busy being Christians that we forget to be with Christ. And then comes burnout, frustration, the feeling that something is wrong, but you do not know what. Because you are doing everything right. You are reading the Bible. You are going to church. You are serving, but you are empty, tired, distant. Jesus did not preach to crowds every day. He withdrew. He sought the Father. He spent entire nights in prayer. He chose depth over volume. He chose intimacy over performance. And in Mark chapter 6, verse 31, he gives a revolutionary invitation to the disciples. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. They had just returned from an intense mission. They were excited. They had much to tell. But Jesus said, stop, come, rest, because he knew that if they did not stop, they would become completely empty. Now think about your spiritual routine. Have you set aside time to truly be with God? Or have you only been fulfilling religious tasks? Do you know his voice? Or do you only know the opinions of others about him? Do you cultivate intimacy? Or do you only collect information? Because there is an abysmal difference between an informed faith and a transformed faith, between knowing about God and knowing God, between having verses memorized and having your heart shaped by the Word. Imagine the difference between watching 5 sermons in a row without reflecting on any of them and listening to a single message with full attention, taking notes, praying, letting it move you, change something in you. Imagine the difference between reading 3 chapters of the Bible, rushing to meet a goal, and reading 3 verses slowly, chewing on each word, letting the Holy Spirit speak to you through them. Imagine the difference between participating in 7 church activities out of obligation and choosing 1 or 2 where you can truly serve with joy, with purpose, without dragging yourself. I am not saying for you to abandon everything. I am saying for you to become curator of your own spiritual life. For each new activity that enters, ask, does this bring me closer to God or just make me busier? Does this generate real fruit or just movement? Does this feed my soul or just fill my schedule? You deserve a faith that is deep, not just wide, a faith that transforms, not just informs. Because in the end, God is not impressed with how much you do. He is interested in who you are becoming. And transformation happens in quietness, in repetition, in depth, not in the rush. Sixth way, refuse what God did not ask. Did you know that the first form of rest is learning to say no? It seems simple, but it is revolutionary. How many commitments have you accepted that God never asked for? How many expectations are you carrying that are not His? They are from family, from church, from society, from Instagram. Jesus said, "Come to me," but we hear the invitation and respond, "I will, Lord. Just let me finish this giant list of things nobody asked me to do." The Bible teaches us in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Guarding the heart means protecting your peace. It means choosing wisely what enters and what leaves your life. It means recognizing that not everything that seems good is from God. Not everything that seems urgent is priority. Not everything others expect from you is what God expects. A few months ago, I met a woman who was on the verge of burnout. She led 3 different ministries at church, took care of the house, worked full-time, and still blamed herself for not being able to wake up at 5 in the morning to pray. When I asked who had asked her to do all that, she stopped. She was silent, and then she admitted, with tears in her eyes, "Nobody." I offered myself. I thought it was my obligation. I thought God expected that from me. I thought if I did less, I would be less. But do you know what she discovered when she finally had the courage to refuse? That God did not need her to do everything. He only wanted her to be present, for her to listen, for her to breathe, for her to live. Isaiah chapter 30 verse 15 brings a painful truth. In quietness and trust is your strength, but you would have none of it. In other words, peace was available. Strength was guaranteed, but it required something few are willing to do. Stop, trust, rest. And we did not want it. We preferred the rush. We preferred the sense of control that comes from doing. We preferred tiredness to rest. Why? Because stopping seems irresponsible. Because trusting seems risky. Because resting seems like laziness. But the truth is that refusing what God did not ask is an act of profound faith. It is trusting that He will not love you less for doing less. It is accepting that your value is not in your productivity. It is in your identity as His daughter. So ask yourself, what am I carrying that God never asked me to carry? Which commitments have I accepted to please people instead of obeying God? Which expectations am I fulfilling that are crushing my soul? And have the courage to let go. Because only when you empty your hands of what is not essential will you have space to receive what God truly has for you. Seventh way, invest in the eternal, not the ephemeral. We have arrived at the heart of this journey. After refusing what is not necessary, choosing depth, organizing your life, establishing boundaries, embracing grace and cultivating silence, you discover something extraordinary. You have gained time. You have gained mental space. You have gained resources. You have gained peace. And now comes the most important question. What will you do with this? How will you invest this treasure? Jesus was direct in Matthew chapter 6, verses 20 and 21. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He was not talking about accumulating religious things. He was talking about living with eternal purpose, about investing in what truly matters, about putting your heart where your treasure is, and your treasure should be in heaven. So the seventh and final way to rest in God is about redefining what wealth is. It is not accumulating more. It is living better. It is investing in experiences, in people, in purpose, in eternity. Because things break, things lose value, things are forgotten, things get old, things disappoint. But memories, connections, personal growth, spiritual impact, these become part of who you are. These nobody can take from you. These have eternal value. Use your time to learn something new that brings you closer to God. Use your money to bless someone who needs it. Use your energy to build true relationships. Use your life to make a difference, not to impress, to impact, not to accumulate, to sow. Because everything you sow here, you reap in eternity. Everything you invest in the kingdom multiplies. Everything you give with generosity returns transformed. Not long ago, a woman came to me completely lost. She had a successful career, a beautiful house, full closets, planned trips, but she was empty, depressed, without purpose. She had invested years accumulating things, but had not invested anything in what truly matters. So she made a radical decision. She sold half of what she had, donated to social projects, and used the rest to go on a mission trip. She spent a month serving in underserved communities, far from comfort, far from social media, far from the perfect life she pretended to have. She returned completely transformed, not because she learned something revolutionary, but because she finally invested in the eternal. She finally used her resources for something greater than herself. She finally understood that life is not about accumulating. It is about sowing. And when you sow in the kingdom, when you invest in the eternal, when you live with purpose, something supernatural happens. You rest because you are no longer running after things that do not satisfy. You are aligned with what truly matters. When you clean your life of excess, when you organize your priorities, when you establish healthy boundaries, when you embrace grace, when you cultivate silence, when you invest in the eternal, something magical happens. You discover that happiness is not in adding more to your life. It is in learning to see more in what you already have. It is in realizing that the peace you seek so much is not in conquering more. It is in resting in God, simply resting, trusting, letting go, and living with eternal purpose. These 7 ways to rest in God are not just practical tips. They are a transformative invitation, an invitation for you to live lighter, more intentional, more present, more aligned with the kingdom, an invitation for you to discover that the peace that few achieve is not because it is difficult. It is because few are willing to do what is necessary, to stop, to refuse, to simplify, to trust, to obey. But you can be different. You can choose peace. You can choose God. You can choose to rest. And I would love to know which of these 7 practices touched your heart most today. Share in the comments which one you would like to adopt in your life. Let us encourage one another on this journey toward true rest. And if this video helped you in any way, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This makes all the difference so that more people find this refuge of peace, purpose, and spiritual intentionality. Let us quickly recap what we learned today, because repetition is the mother of learning. First, cultivate sacred silence and create space to hear the gentle voice of God. Second, establish healthy and holy boundaries. Recognize that you are human. Third, embrace the grace that covers your imperfections and stop trying to be perfect. Fourth, organize your life to protect the sacred space that God deserves. Fifth, choose depth over volume in your faith. Cultivate real intimacy. Sixth, refuse what God did not ask and learn to say no with wisdom. And seventh, invest in the eternal, not the ephemeral. Live with purpose that transcends this life. These 7 steps will lead you to a life that is lighter, deeper, more connected with God, and infinitely more at peace. You will not only have more rest than most, you will become that person who radiates peace in the midst of chaos, the one people look at and think, "What does she have that I do not have?" And the answer is simple. She learned to rest in God. She is not running after peace. She lives in peace because she chose to obey the invitation of Jesus. Come to me, and I will give you rest. Now tell me in the comments, resting in God is freedom. If you enjoyed this video, comment this phrase. I want to know if this content resonated with you and if you are ready to live in a radically different way. Remember, you do not need to do more. You need to be more present, more intentional, more rested in God, more aligned with the eternal. And when you live like this, when you stop running and start resting, when you stop accumulating and start investing in what matters, when you stop trying to prove and simply start being, you not only find the peace that few achieve, you become a living testimony that it is possible to live well, live light, and live full of purpose in a world that insists on overwhelming you. Peace is available. Rest is guaranteed. God is waiting with open arms. The question is, are you ready to stop running and finally rest in Him? The choice is yours, and it begins now.